All right, well, I think I'm going to kick things off. So, welcome everybody to Bridging Passion and Profession, Careers in Humanities and Social Sciences, part of 2025's HSS Expo, which has just been amazing over the past couple of days. There's so much amazing student work. And this year we've added to the expo, which, for those of you who haven't been able to see much of it, really showcases what, students are doing within their departments. We had medieval performances and debates on the quad today, an amazing show of posters, of experiments and research done by sociology students, debates, literary presentations, really a wide range of things. And this year we've added a couple alumni career panels, just as we, as a School of Humanities and Social Sciences, um, attempt to infuse a sort of sense of career readiness into our undergraduate studies, and also to help students appreciate how well prepared a Brooklyn College degree in the humanities and social sciences will make them, when they decide, to pursue any, number of interests and professional pathways. And we have a really great panel today of people who've gone on to do real, amazing things in a range of fields. And I hope that their experiences and what they have to share with us today will, embolden undergraduates here to recognize that all doors can be knocked on and that nothing about their training in the humanities and social sciences stands in the way of the career of their dreams, and in fact, can open a lot of doors for them. And I hope our panelists will be able to share some of their stories and insights. I'll introduce our panelists, but first I'd like to thank Dean Napoli, who's here. His office has been incredibly supportive, pushing the Careers Initiative across HSS. And then Pam Brown from the Magner Career Center, who's been tireless in her efforts to bring alums here, to promote this event, and has just offered so much experience and expertise in this sort of conclave that I'm just really happy to have had the chance to work with her on this. Um, I'll begin by introducing our panelists, who I imagine for many of you students might be scattered about in the tiles, but they're the ones with their faces showing and their cameras on. So first, I'll introduce John Gilmore Jr., MBA, MS, an accomplished technology leader with over 27 years of experience driving impactful solutions across diverse industries, a senior technical program manager at Microsoft right now. He leads the review process for technical service guides for Microsoft's Secure Future initiative. His expertise extends to responsible artificial intelligence, where he's created and delivered educational programming for Microsoft customers on responsible AI principles, policies, and tools. And he's also created and delivered educational programming for founders, a leading Microsoft partner delivering AI-specific training for executives. He's had a range of roles across the industry, and his educational background, which I think is of particular interest to our undergraduates here today, includes a BA in Linguistic Anthropology. And he's also earned an MBA and an MS in Marketing Management at University of Maryland, a BS in Computer Science. Um, and I think, his range of interests and degrees and experiences will be really interesting for us to hear more about. Also with us today is Vanessa Santiago. Um, Vanessa is a seasoned nonprofit executive with over 28 years of experience in human services, focusing on education, youth development, and family support. She currently serves as vice president of the 1199 SEIU Child Care Corporation and director of programs for the 1199 SEIU, the Service Employees International Union. Is that correct? The child care funds overseeing benefits and services supporting nearly 20,000 working families. She's the founder and CEO of BSL Education Consulting, a leadership development firm providing training, facilitation, and strategic support to schools and youth serving organizations. VSL's programs focus on social emotional learning, college and career readiness, and professional development in areas such as classroom management, instructional strategy, and equity-centered leadership. Her career includes serving as managing director of ASPIRA of New York, where she led after-school and college readiness programs across high schools in New York City, Long Island, and Rockland County. She's been a training consultant for Ramapo for Children. She specializes in restorative practices, racial equity, school leadership, and community engagement. She also shares her expertise here as an adjunct lecturer in Puerto Rican and Latino Studies Department, where she earned her bachelor's degree in Puerto Rican and Latino Studies, a Master of Science in Nonprofit Management at the New School, and certifications in Transformative Leadership and Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. Thank you very much for being with us today, Vanessa. We also have with us Jospeh Valerio, an attorney with experience in capital markets, corporate governance, and securities and administrative law matters. A native of Brooklyn, New York, from the heart of Bensonhurst, Joe attended the Macaulay Honors College program at Brooklyn College and received his BA in political science and psychology in 2015. Based on experiences interning for Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, as well as the Office of the New York State Attorney General. Joe attended law school at Georgetown University Law Center in DC and graduated with a JD in 2018. He began his career as a lawyer at Wilkie Farr and Gallagher in New York City. And in April 2021, joined the firm of Paul Weiss, Rifkin, Wharton, and Garrison to work in its capital markets practice. In December 2021, he also joined the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission as an attorney in the Office of the General Counsel, Legal Policy. In February 2025, he returned to private practice at Schulte, Roth, and Zabel in the firm's Mergers and Acquisitions and Securities Group, and continues to work in this domain of finance. He's passionate about mentoring and alumni engagement. He's volunteered with various mentor programmings, such as the Securities and Exchange Commission's Women's Committee Mentor Program, Macaulay Honors College Alumni Mentorship Program, and the Children's Defense Fund's Beat the Odds Alumni Program. Thank you, Joe, for being here. And finally, I would like to introduce Nicole Lebenson Angulo. Nicole Lebenson Angulo is the Deputy Chief of Organization Development at AFS Intercultural Programs, where she leads both internal and external communication strategies for the global organization. This includes ensuring effective communication across more than 55 international offices and managing branding, public relations, fundraising, and alumni engagement. Before this, she was a senior communications manager at the Institute of International Education for 8 years. In this role, she developed and implemented communication strategies for the organization's global initiatives and supported significant organizational changes. She has a master's degree in branding and integrated communications from City College and an undergraduate degree from Brooklyn College, where she majored in history and English literature and was a J.K. Watson Fellow. She was the commencement speaker to the Brooklyn class of 2019 and is a native of Brooklyn who grew up in Fort Greene and went to Brooklyn Tech, currently living in Ditmas Park. All right, I will try to remember to call you Nikki. Well, we have a really wonderful group of panelists, and I want to quickly hand the mic over to them, and hopefully I can prompt you to speak. As you know, part of our motivation here is really as part of the HSS Expo, the Humanities and Social Sciences Expo, and a lot of our students will be from these majors. And one of the things that we hear a lot about, right, is when you tell someone what your major is, oftentimes HSS majors get feedback like, well, what are you going to do with an English degree? What are you going to do with a history degree? And there's often a lot of pushback. And I was wondering if any of you ever got pushback or anxiety, just internally or from your parents, community members, being like, why are you majoring in the humanities and social sciences? And was that something you experienced? And how did you kind of handle that, both as you set off on your intellectual journey and along the way? Who'd like to start?
I can start.
Thank you.
My dad was an a fine artist, so like there was no way that I could make less money than him. So I don't think anyway, he couldn't say anything to me. And then my mother worked in a very practical field, but I think that they understood that if I did something in the humanities, that I would get a really good grounding in reading and writing. And that sounds so basic and silly, but like, I mean, th that is the fundamental skill you need for many, many, many different professions. So, I think I also know that that's very lucky, right? To have parents that might be in fields where they would intrinsically understand that and where they wouldn't be like, why aren't you becoming a car mechanic? Why aren't you, like, how are you going to make a living? Um, but I also think, and we can talk about this later in the context of other things that when you interview for a job, right, your major, and I don't mean this in a bad way, isn't as important sometimes as you think it's going to be when you go out into the real world. The skills you learn are incredibly important, but how someone looks at your resume and reads that, in my practical lived experience is a little different in a great way. That's my experience.
Thanks so much, Nikki. Joe, I saw you nodding along. Do you have anything to add about
No,
this?
I think it's absolutely right. I mean, I was first generation at Brooklyn College. My parents had gone to college, but they never graduated, so they didn't last the rigmarole and all that. I think for me, I had chosen a career in law, but specifically a major in political science. And I double majored in psychology too, I should say. But for me, political science was a door to not only exploring a career in law later on, but I think it was a door to exploring research method and the social science background that I thought was needed for a career in law. I will dispel that today. You actually don't need a degree in political science to become a lawyer. You could become a lawyer with an art major as long as you're able to spin it right, which is why I was nodding along. But for me at the time, I thought, hey, what are the best skills for a lawyer to have? Well, one, you need to have knowledge of policy, law and policy, and how they relate. And so there's Brooklyn College had great coursework, still does. Professor Anna Law was great in terms of the coursework, in terms of like judicial jurisprudence and law and policy. So that was really helpful. And then I double majored in psychology because I thought I was going to be a litigator. And I said, well, what better skill to have than to, know how the human mind works? I could do negotiations effectively and things like that. Didn't pan out that way. I can get more into that. But that was my thought in choosing the majors and how they would develop the career. And no one ever really questioned my decisions in terms of major career, which I was fortunate of. But I think it was because my parents just didn't really know, what the college, like you could do it as long as you get the degree, you're fine. So I was fortunate in that regard that I was able to choose the path.
Thanks so much, Joe. John or Vanessa, did you guys ever experience any kind of pushback against a desire to, major in the humanities or social sciences?
Not pushback. Um, my path is very different in the sense that I was a community college dropout, joined the military, and then Brooklyn College was my post-military coming back to school and ultimately graduating. Um, I had already been an IT person. You hear that I work at Microsoft. I used to be highly technical even prior to my coming to Brooklyn College. As Pam mentioned a bit ago, I worked at the Magner Center there as like a tech uh, part-time student employee. It was fun while getting a degree in linguistic anthropology. Um, it was kind of opposite for me. I wanted to leave the IT field at the time. This was in 2008. The world's crashing, the economy's crashing, and I was so obsessed with the idea of culture and language. I wanted to get that degree. I wanted to get my PhD, teach, be a professor, and just have this new path. And like Joseph said, that did not pan out for me. I just went right back into tech. But I'm so glad I got the humanities degree. I'll never regret that. I can definitely talk more on that later.
So that's interesting. You, for example, knew you had, an interest in tech. Joe, you said you knew you wanted to be a lawyer while you were an undergraduate. Um, Vanessa or Nikki, did you guys have a clear sense of where you were headed professionally while you were undergraduates?
Not at all. I'll say unpopular opinion. I just want to say that I was not a studious person. So even though I went to Brooklyn Tech and I'm a Brooklynite through and through, and I went to Brooklyn College and I loved every minute of it, I have to tell you, I didn't appreciate it when I was there, right? I think when you're a young person, you just kind of want to get things and check off the box and call it a day. So I actually chose Puerto Rican Latino studies, even though I originally wanted to be a film major. I love just everything about film, but I also had to work. So unfortunately, I didn't have the luxury of going to school and just focusing on school. I had to work. So, and it's probably the same way because I do have some film students in my class in my course now. And film is hard, right? And it's like when you talk about young, dumb, and broke, that really is legitimately that career path where it's like you have to focus on your craft and you don't really have time to make money or pay rent or any of that. So as much as I love it and I still kind of like dabble in it a little bit, um, Puerto Rican Latino Studies was supposed to be my minor. I think that I was also blessed as a young person to be a product of my environment and be part of like after school programs and leadership programs. And ASPIRA, I was an aspirante when I was in high school. So when I graduated high school, they actually recruited me to be a part-time leadership development specialist. That's how I started the career. So Jason, to answer your question, it's interesting because for me, my nonprofit career of almost 30 years was literally just like, oh, well, I'm in college. Let me just do a part-time job. And Aspira gave it to me. And it was just going to be an easy peasy type of deal for me. But it created a passion in me that I didn't know I had, right? So even though I wanted to focus on film, um, it allowed, and I wasn't a studious person because I was in education, because I was like, wanting to model the behavior for my young people, I had to finish school. And so much so that I wanted to affect change. And I couldn't do that as a middleman. I had to do that as C-suite or more. So I went and got my master's. And so, again, it's really interesting because for me, and I tell this to all of my students, young and older, when you got to follow your passion. So I feel like I majored in Puerto Rican Latino studies because it's what I wanted to do, and I really didn't care what other people thought. And I was like, I was gonna figure it out. So I was lucky enough to get my degree, and I was able to find the love and passion in nonprofit management, and so it kind of aligned my passion and my love for the work into a career that really I was able to build out of that and continue to do the work. So, we'll talk about that a little bit more, but it's just really interesting. I love listening to other people's stories, and I'm just like, wow, I'm definitely wasn't the studious person, but I think it's also really important for our young people to know and our students to know, like, you go to college because you need to go to college, right? Like this is something that no one can ever take away from you. Your college degree, your education, your credentials are going to be super important. And the more you have of that, the more marketable you are, and the more you can really adapt to what the world needs to be able to be successful in whatever you desire to be as you get older. 'Cause I'm in my 40s and I feel like I'll always find something to do.
Great. Anybody want to add anything on this question of kind of not knowing what you were going to do, or perhaps even just changes in paths along the way, and how being able to think about what mattered to you, what knowing and trusting in your skill set may have emboldened you to make certain choices or take certain opportunities.
I can comment on that. I mean, I thought when I was in college, I had a very clear idea of what I wanted to do. And I think that idea was actually like really wrong. So it's great that that didn't happen because I think I think when I was in college, I had like two visions of myself. I was like, I'm going to be a New York City public school teacher. Well, there is a hiring freeze the year that I graduated, and I'm not sure that would have, maybe later I'll go back and do that. And that is something I love to do. And then the other was I'm going to be an archivist. And I did a lot of work with Professor Napoli and learned a lot about oral history. I happen to think that the job that I have now actually has like a direct line to a lot of the things I did. And Professor Napoli, fun fact, it only took me 15 years, but I am now in charge of the archives at my company, even though it has nothing to do with I got in charge of the archives. So and that's fun. But I do think, and people have different opinions about this, and I think it depends very much on the kind of person you are. I think my theory was like I learned extremely valuable skills. Like Vanessa said, I studied stuff I was interested in studying. And there was I think she might still be the honors college advisor at Brooklyn College, or maybe I'm not sure. Lisa Schwabel. Does Lisa
Yeah.
still? So Lisa like changed my life because I came in and I was having a hard time figuring out a major, even though I had some clear visions of what I wanted to do. And Lisa said, Nikki, look, for your first year here, take what you're interested in. And again, I just want to check my privilege. I was a scholarship student, right? I didn't have the financial pressure of like, I have got to make every credit count. So she was like, take what you like. And at the end of the year, just look backwards and a very clear pattern will emerge for you. And that was great advice that I've used many times in other parts of my life where if a door opens in front of me, I take it. And then I go, do I like this? And if I don't like it, I don't do it anymore. I just stop. You know what I mean? I don't mean I quit my job. And I hustled very hard in university. I worked as a waitress. I worked in a movie theater. I worked as a tutor, right? Like, but I think you study what you like, you pick up the skills you need. When doors open, you walk through them. If it's a bad vibe, you leave, right? But if you keep walking through the open doors where they seem interesting and saying yes to stuff, a pattern emerges. And you keep finding ways to put your skills to work. And then, yeah, I still feel every day working in communications that things I learned from learning to interview people or to really read and write from Professor Napoli, I use that every day. I have a team of 8 people, Professor. When I edit people's stuff, I still put in, stuff that you taught me when you were editing my honors thesis, right? So I feel like you just keep walking forward, moving forward, and a path emerges for you. I know there are other people who take a very curated approach to their life. They're like, no, I'm going to have a vision and I'm going to really take specific steps to get there. And I think maybe in other careers that mindset is necessary, right? Like if you're going to become a medical doctor, you can't kind of walk through open doors. You need to pass exams and stuff. But for me, I felt get skills, pursue what you're interested in, a path emerges, follow the path, and yeah. And then waitress on the side if you're not making enough money. Sorry.
Always. Thank you so much for sharing that, Nikki. One thing that we're lucky about with the stature you all have achieved in your fields, right? You've experience, you've achieved a really high level. And I was wondering, many of you I know have given back as mentors and, but also just in terms of professionally, probably have been involved in watching young people get hired, people who are closer to the college experience. Than you are now, more, along the lines of our audience here today. And I was wondering if you have any observations about the students coming out of college, and their strengths, how that might be connected to, what they studied or just in what ways, in terms of the qualities and skills that you see in your workplaces, which is such a wide range. We have communications, we have education, we have law and finance, we have tech. What are some of the things you're observing as you look to hire and bring up through the ranks, young employees?
I'd love to begin with that. I actually have quite a bit of students in my class right here, so I'm about to talk about them. But I will say, I think one of the things that I admire about this generation that older generations didn't have is that they don't accept status quo, and I think that's super important. I think that when you challenge the process to make society better, to create opportunities and be able to contribute and look at yourself as something other than yourself, right? That you are just a small piece of a big whole. It's something that, my students can tell you, I beat them over the head with it over and over. And I'm like, I'm just going to keep saying this. And this is why I continue to teach, because I think it's important to continue to pass that message. But even though, things are difficult, right? Things are very challenging now. Just, without mentioning other things that have nothing to do with this right now, but there's a lot going on. And I think that the fact that they're able to, 2 things for me, the fact that they're able to challenge the status quo, and also I think we're also workaholics, right? I think the older generations, we were workaholics. And I've learned things from the younger generation where it's like, you got to have, I mean, I won't say it's a work-life balance because I don't think it's that, but like there's a priority list and you're able to really be clear and prioritize what that looks like for you. And I think in older generations, we didn't do that. I think we kind of worked our way to sickness. to some extent, where I think young people now really have like, yeah, I'm not doing that. Like, it doesn't feel good. I'm not doing that. And I have to tell you, as somebody who is a workaholic, I have to sometimes take a step back and say, I love that. I love that about young people, because a lot of the times, you know, people will always complain about our younger generation and what they can't do, or what, you know, they don't do this, and we used to be, and back in the day. And it's like, but it's not that anymore, right? They are our future, and we have to look at it and accentuate the positive and really identify, you know, how do we bridge the gap between who we were, who we are, and who they are, and really build a stronger foundation for them and a support system for them. Because I hope that one day they will, you know, pay into my Social Security so that I can live comfortably as I get older. We want to make
If
sure
it's still around.
systems, right, it's still around.
Um, Great. Other reflections on, you know, maybe some of the training that, you know, you're witnessing in young employees. You know, do you observe a difference between students who've really followed a passion as undergraduates and pursued knowledge in just a field that they're interested in, rather than just maybe those who are, you know, trying to choose the safest bet, you know? Like Joseph in finance and law, are you finding other humanities majors, you know, who are like you, who are interested in, you know, psychology and political science, or even maybe English and history and the like? Or you, John, too? I know there's a lot of overlap between, you know, not only linguistics, which we house in the English department here at Brooklyn College, but philosophy. You know, a lot of that stuff feeds into the AI. And I'm just wondering, do you see, you know, young humanities and social science majors stepping into your fields and being well prepared?
You know, the network that I have built doing responsible AI work, of course, you know, we're talking to a lot of folks who were maybe lawmakers, policymakers, right? These folks working at social justice organizations, really talking about these types of things. Um, you know, going back to the original question you had asked about students coming in and maybe a humanities focus and what they're coming with and what they're maybe lacking or what they have going into the workforce, what are they bringing? It's interesting because at Microsoft, of course, we're seeing so many engineers, right? You know, we don't really see that many humanities folks. At least, you know, I live in Azure engineering, which is our big cloud technology. And so I have done a lot of mentoring in Microsoft for college students who are coming in, doing the internships, or brand new employees straight out of college. And part of those mentor programs aren't just set up for us to say, hey, welcome to the workforce, or here's what you need to be a great tech from a technical standpoint, but we've actually been asked and tasked to teach these students or new hires uh, all about humanities types things, right? Like, all right, now you've had computer science shoved down your throat for the past however many years. Now you're this amazing engineer. Do you understand how to communicate with people effectively at a professional level? Do you understand how to um, understand people from different walks of life and make sense of things? Can you research anything other than how to find code, right? Like, can you problem solve in this way that isn't necessarily just a mathematical uh, problem solving? And so that's been a big focus of us and our young engineers coming up is adding that. So I feel very fortunate that I started with the humanities um, and have added the tech later. But yeah.
Thanks so much for that perspective, John.
Jason, I could jump in from the finance law perspective. I think from what I've seen with the generation of students coming in is, it's a generation that's been troubled with, they'll live through a pandemic that affected like right in between their educational careers, right? Whether you're in college or high school, during the time. So I'm seeing students who are coming out, and with the news every day the way it is in terms of the job market and things like that, they're incredibly motivated and driven. Like every student who I've talked to in an undergraduate or high school capacity has their eye so much more far ahead than I did when I was in college. I mean, I wasn't even, I was taking it year by year with a general goal. And I have students who are calling me up in their undergraduate career, asking me like, oh, how do I become a lawyer day one? So I think there's a focus on really trying to like build a career very quickly that I've seen in students. Which I think is a good approach to have. I also do caution them that they should try and explore different things when they're in college because they might not like the career that they settle on. But in terms of the folks coming in, I mean, like law is very competitive now. Law school averages, LSAT scores are through the roof. I mean, my LSAT score that I got in with Georgetown, you know, back in 2015, probably wouldn't have cut it today, to be very honest with you. And a lot of my coworkers think otherwise. So it's just incredibly competitive. It's incredibly hard. It's because everyone's really smart coming up through the ranks, which is great. But if you're a student, it just makes it that much more competitive. If for humanities students, you know, like whether that's an issue with becoming a lawyer or something like that, no. I mean, I think I've seen all walks of life become lawyers. I've gone to law school with all, you know, science majors, art majors, women's studies majors, you name it. Anyone could become a lawyer if you have the drive. If you're humanities focused, I think it helps you communicate better. As John said, I think there's a lot of folks who could benefit from very clear and empathetic communication in law that we don't have. And I think that that's a benefit that serves the community. The one piece of advice I'll give every student on this call today is you have a network. You're at Brooklyn College, you have a network of alumni, you have a network of professors and folks who work at the Magner Center and things like that. Pull on that network. You're in undergrad now, you're exploring your career options. You might think you want to be a lawyer, you might think you want to be a teacher, you might think you want to be a professor, but try and explore as many options now while you're in undergrad. Do internships to the extent that you can. If you can't do internships, grab a coffee with someone who's in a field that you like. Reach out to them on LinkedIn. Do whatever you can to immerse yourself as much as you can in the field you think you're interested in before you pull the trigger on going either into the field or into a higher education opportunity in the field, because you don't want to make a mistake, especially in law. Like, it's a very expensive mistake if you don't want to be a lawyer. So I mean, the number one thing I could say is just reach out. It's never an issue if I get you know, a cold call from a student on LinkedIn, like a message out of the blue. I usually get recruiter messages asking me to like jump ship to different firms. A student's message is a breath of fresh air for me. The worst that happens is they say no. Like, the best that happens is you could get on the line with them for 20, 30 minutes. Maybe they become a mentor. So just don't be shy. Like my biggest impediment as a first generation college student, as someone who was just kind of, you know, figuring out college, was I was always worried I was going to bother someone, you know, be a burden on their time. It's not true. Really, it's all self-imposed burdens at that point. So I really encourage you, while you have the time now, reach out to that network, get on LinkedIn, get a LinkedIn running up. You know, cold call people, you know, ask your professor for office hours just to pick their brain on what students have done. Do whatever you can now. I can't stress it enough.
And I can just build on that super quickly. Like, I really want to emphasize what you said. I have an aunt who's a doctor who always gave great career advice. She was like, you have to like your bread and butter. So she was like, don't become a brain surgeon because you think it would be cool to like save people by doing brain operations if you don't like, you know, treating strokes and aneurysms, right? So you may like the idea of a career, but you have to do what Joseph said and make sure you like the bread and butter, the day-to-day of it. And I think, just in terms of going back to the very start of the question you asked, right? Like, just very practical advice for interviews and my experience of interviewing young people. You have to just be like, when you go into an interview, draw a direct line between stuff you actually did and the job. I have a lot of people come into interviews who tell me all about themselves. And I'm like, that's so cool. So like, I have a job I need you to do. So can you do it? Right. And you can have done whatever. I don't care what your classes were. Actually, there's a style of interviewing that's very popular, and it's what we use at my company. It's called the behavioral event interview, where someone will press you very hard to tell a specific story about a time you used a specific skill. So if you're taking a class, like, again, oral history class that I took with Professor Napoli, right? And I'm hiring you to be my communications coordinator, you would want to tell me, I'm a really great writer. I had to do this. I see that you require me using these programs in my class on oral history. I used that program 7 times for a project I did on XYZ. So I think a lot of times young people in particular, come in and like sort of tell you the story, but you have to connect the dots for someone. The employer just needs someone to do a job, and probably will not really have noticed your GPA or what your major was. They want to know, like, what actual stuff did you do? Can you do the job that I need to get done? And your ability to tell that story and show that you carefully read the job interview, that's a great use of AI. Use AI to help prep you for a job interview, or like upload your resume and have AI coach you on how your resume can connect to the job description to help you practice for an interview. So just that level of specificity, showing that you really understand what the job is. And then the other thing is, sometimes I have people come in for interviews and they don't ask me any questions at the end. And I think in the humanities, you learn all about asking questions, right? That's like the core of studying something, reading something, is having questions. So bring that skill to the interview process. Like, definitely ask questions. If I have an interview with someone, it doesn't matter if they went, I don't care where they went to school and what their GPA was. If at the end I said, do you have any questions for me? And they say no, like 99.9% chance I would not hire that person, because I would just be like, okay, well, I don't know. So that's my just super dry, concrete advice about interviewing for anyone on this call who may be in the process of seeking a job.
That's so great. Really valid. You said something, Joseph, I think it was you, about, wanting to make sure you really learn the day to day. And, um, you know, and Nikki, you were talking about like that bread and butter of a certain job. And what happens if you find yourself in a job, maybe even a career path, and you're like, you know what? I'm not sure this is for me. And like you've already sunk a couple of years, into that firm or that business or that training. Like, is it okay to just pivot and try for something different? How can we avoid? We had an interesting speaker yesterday talk about, they were in the philosophy department. They thought they wanted to be a philosophy professor. They were in a PhD program for 4 years, right? And then just had this moment where they were like, that's not what I wanted to. And they had a hard time pulling themselves out of the program because they felt like, oh, I've already sunk so much time. Can I even do anything else? And sure enough, he could. He relied on his interests, his background to pursue another passion, and was, on stage yesterday sharing his success. But I want to maybe talk about that, that path, how those kind of curves in the road, and what it is to get nervous about making changes and going for different opportunities, and how our students might think about that, and maybe even how their backgrounds in the humanities, social sciences might help them navigate those turbulent transitions.
Well, my advice is, I mean, I've experienced this where there's never a clear path from A to B. So if you asked me when I started law school if I'd be a securities and capital markets lawyer, I'd laugh at you and be like, what is that? I'm going to be a litigator in public policy. Because that's why I originally went to law school, was to do law and public policy. I think for folks who find themselves in a career path that they're unhappy with, I think you have to do an inventory of the skills you've gained based on what area you're in. You're a philosophy major. You've obviously gained skills from learning philosophy, whether it's, concrete reading and, analytical skills related to that, whether you've made a speech or a thesis related to that. There's something you can pull out of that to apply to a job in a different context. A couple of years ago, I went from private to government. It's a weird transition because when you work for clients for, a good 3 years, you have to then prove to government that, you have public interest in mind. And I think for me, the one thing that stuck with the government opportunity was I had done so much as an undergrad separate from my job in private. I had interned for Kirsten Gillibrand. I had interned for the New York State Attorney General. So I had used my past experience that I gained while at Brooklyn College to say, hey, I'm still committed to that. It's been a couple of years. I had to pay off my loans and do stuff like that, but I want to come back to government. I want to work on policy issues. I want to work for the American people. So I think, you know, you take the inventory of the skills that you gained, the experiences you're gaining now while you're at Brooklyn College, and you should expound on them. Whether you're able to do internships, whether you're working part-time, you're gaining something from the experience that you can use to market yourself. And you take that and you go forward with it. And there's no clear path. I mean, I think, you know, I honestly think you can't make a mistake with your career as long as you have a reasoned explanation for the next step in the line, because I really don't think life pans out to be A, B, C. I think it's a zigzag.
Thanks so much, Joe.
Can I just add, I think it's in the nature of being an HSS major, right? When you take something that's a little bit more broad, you have the ability to reinvent yourself. And I think that what I try to instill in people that I speak to is that they need to trust them. They have to trust themselves, and figure that out. If it feels good, even if like they have to identify like what that weird feeling in their gut is, right? Is it anxiety? Is it nervousness? Is it apprehension? Is it whatever it is? Like they have to really be or try to be in tune as much as they possibly can with what it is and not be afraid of what they can do. And I think that again, that's just a beautiful thing of being able to have a very macro way or general way of looking at you know, your undergraduate degrees, to be able to say, okay, you know, I can use it. I mean, with Puerto Rican Latino studies, you know what? And it's funny, Jason. So back to your original point, you're like, oh, did anyone ever question you? You know, I didn't get that question when I was in school. I got it after I was a professional for 25 years. And they're like, well, what did you do with your degree? And I'm like, I became a social studies expert, right? I became a professor. I worked for nonprofits, like big and small, large, like federal. Like I was able to really speak on pretty much everything because of the critical thinking skills I learned as a Puerto Rican Latino studies major within the HSS, you know, realm. And that that's to me is the biggest piece, is that having young people really understand the power that they have to be able to shift and really identify what their strengths are, and even identify the opportunities for growth, because that's another area of opportunity that they have to be like, well, I like this but I don't know enough about this. Okay, well then now you can go in and learn more about it, right? And having those conversations. So that's kind of what I love about the work that I do, that I continually do. I mean, I even do that with adults, like the superintendents of schools, doing restorative justice practices within school districts. It's like, you know, this is us working together in the relationship building, which is why I love my degree in pearls. And again, just being in this niche of HSS, I I I wouldn't discourage anybody from doing that. And I think that that's the beautiful thing of who we are as people, right? That we are just so broad about what our interests are and where we can go, that we can really do anything.
Yeah.
So much for that, Vanessa. It's just so valuable. You know, we heard some stuff yesterday at our panel about how, you know, all industries are subject to sudden change and transformation, right? And you can be prepared with a skill set for 2025 in one of 20 industries, and you don't know which one of those industries in 2026 you suddenly there's no job because AI has replaced it, new technology has come, a new center of, you know, dominance has emerged. And how, like what you're saying, Vanessa, that the skills you learn in the humanities and social sciences make you so adaptable, right? You can really preserve what you've learned, but then turn it to new directions. And I think that's just a really valuable insight. We have about 15 minutes left, and I wanted to give a chance for all our, you know, audience members to pose any sort of question to our guests, to the field, to the group as a whole, or even just a micro question about specifically about Microsoft or about, you know, the SEC. Really, just this is really a chance for you guys to ask whatever's on your mind. And so are there any questions from the audience? I'm also happy to read it off the chat if you didn't feel like turning on your mic and camera. We'll take questions in any format. Any volunteers?
Don't be scared.
A shy group. Well, while we wait for some people to work up their questions, maybe I can ask you all, you know, you guys have given some really great advice this evening. I'm really appreciative of that, and I'm sure our students are too. Are there pieces of advice that you received along the way, that you've always held on to that maybe came from a surprising corner or something that maybe didn't matter at the time you heard it, but then later you were like, oh yeah, that was so smart of them to tell me. Just to take this opportunity for some of our students who maybe don't go to a lot of job panels, just what might be a piece of advice that you really have come to cherish?
Don't do any job because your parents are telling you to. That's the number one piece of advice I've heard echoed. I think it's true. I mean, don't become a lawyer because your parents said to. Don't become a doctor. Do what you want to do. Because if you do what your parents want you to do and you hate it, you're going to be miserable. And it's going to be that much harder to change careers.
Thanks for sharing that, Joe.
May I ask the panel one question? How did you get your first jobs? Nikki, how did you get your first job? Your first
my first job in an office, because my first job I got by working in a movie theater. But my first grown-up job, I was a J.K. Watson Fellow, which is only available to CUNY students. I don't know if anyone else, or CUNY plus one random private school on the island of Manhattan. But I had 3 paid summer internships. And this is completely thanks to me being a Brooklyn College student, to me, my advisor flagging an opportunity with me and coaching me on it. So totally owe that to Brooklyn College. And the last internship, I was in Mexico City. And I worked at an organization I'd never heard of called the Institute of International Education. And someone from New York came for an event that as an intern I helped plan. And he said, when you get back to New York, if you ever need any help, let me know. So I got back to New York and I was like dead set on getting my PhD in American history and becoming an archivist or something. And like, that was definitely not in the cards. But while I did it, I really needed to work. So I was waitressing, waiting to get into my PhD program, which I didn't get into. And I someone else said before, like, never be shy. I reached out and I said, hi, is there any work available at IIE? And I got a part-time job there, and 8 years later was still working there. The guy who was my boss there became the CEO of the company that I work at. So like 200% the job that I have today is related to an opportunity that I had only because I was a City University of New York student and I pursued it. And it's thanks to the faculty of CUNY that helped me do it. So yeah, that was mine.
And the value of internships, right? Just having been, trying this out. And, I think once again, it's a really great message for our students is, ask about internships at the Magner Center, right? They have extensive resources at the departmental level. Your chairs, your professors might know of some too. And you see just the unexpected opportunities that emerge from that. Phil, as you asked your question, oh, great. I'm going to come back to John's comment in the chat because we have a question from Lily.
Wow, I didn't think you saw that. Thank you. Yeah, my question is, if I literally went and applied to so many internships, but everything is like full at this point. That's what I'm getting at. I applied to like, I don't know, over 25. I'm not hearing back from them, or they're just telling me that they're full. Do you know of any availability left for, I should say, business, accounting, finance, economics, something like that?
Maybe.
Hi, Lily. I would say that there is a hiring cycle for those particular areas, and it's usually November. So right now, they're not really recruiting. So it does depend on what particular industry you're going into or looking to go into, to always pay attention to the hiring cycles when it happens, when the recruiting starts. So I would say that might be the reason why you're not getting feedback. But hey, you can explore something else. Right?
Law is what I go to eventually, but I mean, everything has accounting in it, but even if it was law, I'm not finding anything.
I'm gonna stick my neck out, right? So my wife, my bride of 37 years, works in finance, and send me your CV, and I'll put my email in the chat. I'll pass it on. That's all. That's nobody's promising anything, but we're taking advantage of the advice we've been given multiple times. Network. So,
and if I could say, Phil, could you send Lily your resume to me first and let me look at it to make sure it's ready to go to Phil?
Yeah, absolutely. I could do that. But I
Okay,
don't
I'll
know
put
how,
my
like,
I'll put my
when I
email in the chat. Okay.
yeah, because I was trying to register, it wasn't uploading. Thank you.
This is great. And there might be even more kind of, announcements of internships, and just I recommend you, yeah, make an appointment with the Magner Center, meet with Pam. And it also tells us that we need to make sure that, we're broadcasting these cycles, and that the information is reaching undergraduates about what's a good time to be looking at internships and stuff like that. So it tells us kind of what we can do more of to make sure students are on top of these cycles and stuff like that. So thank you so much for asking that question, Lily. It turned into a really productive inquiry.
Can I add something to that though? Like,
Of course.
I think, Lily, just like building off of that, don't knock a service job either. Or sometimes, I mean, like, I did find a lot of it very, like, for instance, even when I was mentioning working like in a movie theater, if there's a place, right? Like you mentioned you want to ultimately work in law or something with finance, like try and get close, close enough, right? Like maybe it won't be an internship because actually I will say like, I really like the changes in New York state law, but working at a not-for-profit that doesn't have a huge budget, some of the changes that happened like in the last 10 years in New York state law make it a little bit harder sometimes to hire interns or to find interns. And I'm sure Pamela and Jason and Phil, you can comment on that more than me, but like look for companies where you could get like adjacent to that, right? And that's not always the worst idea ever. You can make some money, right? And you can learn about like the industry. So I would also say like don't be I would say don't just think about internships. Think about how you can get really, really practical hands-on experience or adjacent experience so that if you walk into an interview, you can say, I have never done an internship in accounting, but I did work at this organization and I connected with these people. And, once you're in there, like see if you can reach out and say, hey, are there projects that I can work on? I'd really like to work my way towards that field. Like my first 5 years working at IAE, I didn't like what I did. I love the organization and the mission, but I had to sort of like work my way like laterally towards projects that I liked and people that I liked. So play the long game. Don't be super narrow. Like it doesn't have to be classified as an internship. Also look at entry level jobs, right? That it is a company that does the kind of stuff you're interested in. And it might take a long time, which sucks and is frustrating, but you can like laterally work your way towards what you want to do and learn something about yourself along the way, perhaps.
And great, just so everybody can see,
Thank you
there's
for
some
that.
new,
No,
new
to be honest with you, I was looking more business, but I was even looking like to the point where it's like performances or something, some like some random stuff. I just applying to get a job at this point. I find it like so hard because at this point everyone already found their people and everything is full. Even like I tried to do lifeguarding and that's full. It's like I wasn't just focusing on business. It's just hard to find an internship at this point.
Yes. So there's a lot been happening in the chat. Just want to catch people up. So following along this question of, finding opportunities, some resources have been dropped into the chat. The Magner Center can also guide you through many resources. And also one great thing that the Magner Center offers, because many internships are not paid, right? And that can be a real hindrance to students who need to contribute, those finances to make things work. We often have funding through Brooklyn College to compensate students for unpaid internships. So it is competitive, especially this time of year as summer's approaching. A lot of things are already set up, but there's definitely some avenues to look down. I wanted to get back to a comment that John made when, around the time Phil asked his question about first jobs. And John wrote in the chat, when he graduated with a BA in linguistic anthro, his first job out of college was in the marketing department at a large law firm, Paul Weiss. The humanities degree was key for that type of work. And there's so much happening in that comment, right? Not only right? Do we see this link between the humanities and a job in a, you know, what you might think of as a business field, marketing, right? Which is all about telling stories, using language, right? Understanding psychology. But it's at a large law firm. So even within, you know, a law firm, there's, you know, all these different functions, you know. So just a lot of opportunities to explore. And it's those kind of things that I think are worth experimenting with. You know, it's like, oh, I didn't know I wanted to work at a law firm, but maybe, you know, writing for some marketing documents would play to my strengths as a humanities major. And who knows what you find in terms of who you meet, like we've been saying, you know, a type of work that's more interesting than you thought, because the jobs out there are so specialized, and as an undergraduate, you don't really know what like that bread and butter day-to-day activity might be. So definitely experiment, definitely take some chances, and you know, you never know how luck and opportunity might combine for you. John has also posted you know, some early in profession Microsoft careers, some internships. So lots of resources. I really am grateful to the panelists for providing those, and I'll emphasize again that the Magna Career Center can really help you make sure your resume's got all the right keywords, you know, it's in the right format for the various industries you might be applying to, strategizing how to translate the skills you're gaining in the humanities and social sciences into marketable skills that belong on your resume, and can really catch the eye of readers after it gets through that round of AI filtering. You know, that's why you need those keywords in the right formatting. But the Magna Center can help you with all that. You've now met, so to speak, some great mentors from the Brooklyn College community, who've said they're happy to receive more outreach from you guys. So maybe you'll take them up on that. We are at our final minutes, so I just wanted to take this time to really express our gratitude for Joe and John and Nikki and Vanessa for being with us today, for taking time out of your busy schedules to share your experiences and your expertise. Thanks again to Dean Napoli and Howard Brown and the Magner Center for making this possible. I'm Jason Friedman, professor of English, and really happy to have been able to facilitate this conversation. And I wanted to especially thank you all, students, many of whom are not showing your faces, for, you know, for being here. Lily, thank you so much for asking that question, which led to so much great discussion. And I hope everybody, you know, has a great night and a great end of the semester.